But the other side of my coin is I grew up homeless as a child. I grew up predominantly in black neighborhoods in the United States of America. And I can tell you that at a certain point, those neighborhoods, those communities, those people also want to hear about the policies that are going to make their lives better. And many of them believe that the last 3.5 years of the Biden administration actually made their lives much worse.
And the time is 5:46.
The power is with the people. Are you ready to get to work?
The road to the White House.
I had God on my side. I felt that.
On Times Radio.
So it is time to have a look at what's going on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. The presidential election rushing up. It's in November. Every week at this time here on Times Radio, we talk to players, we talk to analysts, the best of their kind, to get you right up to date and up to speed and knowing what's going on behind the scenes as well as in front of the curtain. And today, I can welcome to the program Doug MacKinnon, who of course is a former official at the White House and at the Pentagon. Hello to you, Doug.
I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, Doug. I mean, just your thoughts, first of all, on just the way this thing has changed and the expectations of the presidential election. You can't say they've been transformed, but they have been so significantly altered in recent days.
Yeah, it's been probably the last, over the last 3 weeks or so, it's been one of the most surreal moments in U.S. presidential history, of course, where Joe Biden was basically forced out by the hierarchy and the power brokers of his own party. And then, of course, they anointed Kamala Harris as vice president, who he endorsed, by the way, to be fair to her, as the next Democratic nominee to run against President Trump. Then, of course, 2 weeks earlier, you had an assassination attempt against former President Trump. So it's been a really strange, surreal time here in the United States.
So it so has. I mean, how do you, I wonder, account for the remarkable show of unity now behind Kamala Harris? Was she underrated, do you think, before now? Or is it really that the Democrats, they've got to go all in because she may or may not be the best option. She's the only option.
Well, that's exactly right. Because a lot of Democrats I know, and I speak to a lot of senior Democrats here in the United States, they actually wanted to have an open convention. They weren't convinced that Kamala Harris was their best candidate to run against President Trump. But of course, the Democrats decided they weren't going to have an open convention. And so now, to your point, they have to run with her because that's who they have. And so everyone basically from Hollywood to the media, to the academics are rallying behind Kamala Harris. That's to be expected. And she's having a little bit of a honeymoon period, right? Which is also normal, which also, by the way, is going to extend a little bit longer than normal because the Democrats' convention starts August 19th, and so she's going to get another really great burst of media going forward.
Yeah.
So this election's really not going to start in terms of a level playing field until right after Labor Day in the United States.
Right, but it's not just about moral support and inside the Democrat tent. The lift in support among American voters who are young, who are black, who are Latinos, and some of those all-important swing voters, that has been really surprising, hasn't it?
Well, it not really, in the sense that, again, this is such a burst of energy for Kamala Harris, and good for her that she's getting this. And of course, like anything else, she's going to identify with a lot of demographics, and they're going to be very proud of her, and they should be, because it's in many ways, it's a great American story. But ultimately, so as someone that worked for 2 Republican presidents in the White House, but the other side of my coin is I grew up homeless as a child. I grew up predominantly in black neighborhoods in the United States of America. And I can tell you that at a certain point, those neighborhoods, those communities, those people also want to hear about the policies that are going to make their lives better. And many of them believe that the last 3.5 years of the Biden administration actually made their lives much worse.
Yeah. Are you surprised, Doug, by the extent to which the Republican Party, the grand old party, were caught so completely on the hop by Joe Biden standing down? I know it took a bit of doing on the part of those who wanted to see Joe Biden give way, but it wasn't entirely unforeseeable. And they put every egg in that basket of taking on Joe Biden. There didn't seem to be a plan B.
Well, that's kind of, and in a way, I'm certainly not surprised, because here in the United States, and any given week, I can be the most read columnist in the country, right? And so over the course of the last year and a half, I wrote 10 columns saying flat out, Joe Biden would not be the nominee.
Right.
And the Republicans and Trump better get ready for Plan B. So I certainly wasn't surprised. I do think not so much the Trump campaign, but I do think some Republicans were caught flat-footed and they're trying to catch up.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at what happened at the Republican National Convention, where I was there in Milwaukee, there was no sign of a plan B there. Every piece of ammunition was directed at Joe Biden. They didn't even spare too many shots for Kamala Harris. She was there. She was mentioned. Of course she was. But she seemed to come up on the rails in a way that people like you, and you weren't the only one, thought it was possible. They just expended so much ammunition there, arguably to their cost.
Well, again, you have to remember too that the day before Biden pulled out,
Yeah.
which was on a Sunday, the night before, he was adamantly saying he was not going to leave the race, that he was going to stay in.
Yeah.
And so, at a certain point, the Republicans took him at his word. But then there was so much pressure from the Democratic power brokers behind the scenes to get him out of there that ultimately, President Biden decided, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. But again, some of it, obviously should have been anticipated. I certainly anticipated. It's not a secret. And the Republicans have to catch up a little bit.
Right. Now, I wonder how the GOP are thinking now about trying to turn the narrative around, because we haven't even got to the Democratic National Convention. And when the convention comes around, it means blanket exposure. That means a bit of another hike in the opinion polls. The GOP have to be thinking about, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with what follows afterwards? What are they thinking, do you reckon? You've still got the big arguments in the background about the economy, which have been working in Trump's favor until now. Do you think it will level out of its own accord, that momentum will start to shift again? Or do they have to do something differently and do it better?
No, I think exactly that's right. Right after Labor Day, right after about September 6th here in the United States, I think it's going to level out and start slowly moving back towards former President Trump's favor. Because what they're going to do is the same thing that Joe Biden did in 2020, and that is hammer Kamala Harris on her record. And you have to remember that when she ran against, former Vice President Biden in the Democratic primary in 2020, she was the first one out of that primary. She did not get one delegate. Her record could not stand scrutiny. And again, since that time, she's on, video on YouTube and so many places espousing sort of far left opinions. And the Trump campaign is going to turn every one of those into a commercial.
Okay, and look, tell me, JD Vance has not had a happy beginning to his time as the vice presidential pick for Donald Trump. I was looking at some numbers being broadcast on one of the American networks just the other night. I think right after the convention, his favorability score was -5. Now that compared to +20 for Sarah Palin. It was way behind Dan Quayle. They had pretty unhappy runs as vice presidential picks. I mean, what do you make about that? What have your impressions been of JD Vance? Was it a mistake? And do you think anything could be done about it at this stage?
I think at this stage, nothing is going to change. I think, again, prior to the convention, if they knew, in fact, that President Biden was going to drop out and Kamala Harris was going to be the nominee for sure, would they have looked at someone like, former Governor Nikki Haley a little more closely? I suspect they probably would. She being a woman of color, her parents being immigrants from India to the United States, she's got an amazing backstory as well. But I think with J.D. Vance, what President Trump likes about J.D. Vance is he believes that he's going to carry on his legacy. Because remember, if and when President Trump gets reelected, he only has 4 years in office, and he wants somebody more than anything to carry on his legacy. He believes J.D. Vance will do it. And I think also, again, some of the noise and the negativity surrounding Vance is slowly going to ebb. And right now, the #1 best-selling book in the United States of America is J.D. Vance's memoir, Hillbilly Elegy.
Yes.
And so people are still really interested in his backstory.
Are you interested in JD Vance still as an asset to the Trump Vance ticket? I mean, can he recover? Do you now feel he's going to be a drag anchor on the campaign from here on in, or could he have another second wind and start to become more popular again? What do you reckon?
No, I think he is going to recover because, again, this stuff is, this is politics, right? This is what happens every single day. The Democrats' new mantra is to call either President Trump, J.D. Vance, other senatorial candidates weird. That's the message of the week for the Democrats. But all of that stuff is silly. It has a half-life. It burns off. J.D. Vance, is a very bright guy. Obviously, he went to Yale. Law school. He served in Iraq and in the United States Marine Corps.
Yes.
He understands, and he's been in politics for a while, so he's going to understand how I have to personally right the ship. And again, what's interesting with him again is he does have a really good backstory. He's his attraction for Trump also, aside from carrying on his agenda, is going to be to try to flip some votes in the Rust Belt, try to flip some Democrats, try to flip some independents.
Yeah.
Because again, at the end of the day, I worked on 3 winning presidential campaigns here in the United States. And ultimately, it comes down to taking 1/8% from one county, 1/4% from one district, 1/8% from one state. That's how you win a presidential election. You just shave off vote after vote after vote. And JD Vance still has the potential to do that for Trump.
You think he could still be a net asset more than a liability, do you, Doug?
I think come October, he will be a net asset for sure.
Okay. Can I ask you about another story which is getting a lot of attention in sections of the American media right now? It is intriguing stuff. There's just been an election in the state of Arizona where the recorder for Arizona, the guy who gets the votes together and certifies whether things are above board and can be certified as such, there's been an election and a new person's been put in that job. Now, this person's being identified with those who are more skeptical about the validity of the 2020 election. And you'll know that in Rolling Stone magazine, there was something of an investigation which found, I think, that dozens of elected officials in swing states of America, the ones that are going to decide the election, come from the ranks of election deniers. What are your thoughts on that? Because there will be some, won't there, who look at all of that and say, look, how can we trust that if the result goes against the Republican Party, it will be accepted by these officials?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big negatives. Again, for these, the folks that are the election deniers, I think the biggest favor they can do for former President Trump, if they want him to get reelected, is to be quiet and go away and never say another word, because that's in the past. You're not going to change that. Yeah. And all you do by bringing these things up is you put it back in the news cycle. And what they do is they hang those things around Trump's neck like an anvil, right?
Yeah, but I guess the worry is not just about the last election. As you say, there wasn't too much talk about the 2020 election in Milwaukee at the Republican convention. But when it comes to the November election, is there any grounds for people to be concerned that these key officials in key states just may not accept the result as they come in?
I don't think so at all, because again, I suspect the Republican Party itself would shut that down fairly quickly. And you have to remember, again, as you guys went through in the UK, the COVID experience was very, very strange. It highly impacted the election here in the United States. It changed a lot of the normal voting procedures, everything else. We're not going to have that this time. So I suspect, again, it's going to be a lot quieter with regard to the election deniers, and that'll be a good thing for former President Trump.
Okay, and one hopes for the sake of American democracy, and we all wish American democracy well. The thing can go through relatively smoothly. No one can imagine it's going to be entirely smooth. I don't think, knowing what we know, given what we've seen. Just the last thought on the state of the campaign so far. On the GOP side, the Republican side, can they start to make up the ground which they've fallen behind on when it comes to raising money? Because the Democrats have had an enormous spurt of money raising behind Kamala Harris, and that's going to be vital in fighting in these swing states. Just a word on that.
Yeah, I think ultimately they're gonna at least hold their own going forward in terms of raising that money. Trump's going to have hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $1 billion, come in between now and election day, so that's going to be fine. And again, what they have to do is just stick to the policies that are affecting the citizens of the United States of America.